Hello, my name is Michelee Smith-Tynes. I am a journalist, a teacher, and an author. My motto is honest dialogue built on pure intention can incite change. Lately, I've done a lot of live shows on Instagram dealing with racial trauma and mental health. Since April, I have interviewed people of different races from the UK, India, Canada, and of course, the United States. It has been an amazing experience. I am now honored to be here with all of you today. I am inspired by the work you teens are doing. Young people today are vocal, dedicated, educated, resourceful, committed, and wise beyond their years. Thank you for providing me with such a great opportunity to be a part of the amazing work that all of you are doing. I appreciate you, all of you. Your mission, which is to bring people together closer during this time of separation and see the true meaning of empathy and togetherness, well, those words are close to my heart. Our world has seen unprecedented change in just a few short months. More than 170,000 people have died due to the COVID-19 pandemic, and the number keeps rising every day. Deepest condolences if you or any of your family members were affected. After months on lockdown, our country witnessed the death of an American citizen at the hands of a public servant, which sparked protests. The American citizen was George Floyd, and the public servant was a police officer. There was so much raw emotion, and so many Americans had been confined to their home for months. We took to the streets and found our voices in all the pain. I feel bad that few adults have taken the time to wade through all the chaos and explain to you kids, literally, what in the world is going on. I'm pretty sure you've seen the BLM protests. You might even chant, Black Lives Matter with your friends. But what does that really mean? As a teen, you might say that to support your friends, and the concept is meaningful. But I'm a teacher. My job is to guide you. I don't want you to just hop on the bandwagon, but instead to know the true meaning of the term. The statement, Black Lives Matter, is said as a reminder and to draw attention to the issue of American citizens killed by those who take an oath to protect and serve them, police officers. There are Americans who are murdered simply because of their skin color. It is said to remind America that its African American citizens should never have been traumatized, abused, and even killed by its police officers. It is a declaration that these injustices must stop. The deaths of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Rayshard Brooks, and others have drawn the spotlight to so many injustices in our country. Also, the overtly racist murder of Ahmaud Arbery because of his skin color drew even more blaring attention to the reality of hatred on the basis of skin color in America. I also have my own personal experience with police officers who abused their authority. When I was only 14, my mother and I were racially profiled. What does that mean? Profiling is when police officers stop and harass individuals on the basis of skin color. The darker a person's skin color, the more likely they are to be profiled. This can happen in Black communities, but in my case, my mother and I lived in a predominantly white neighborhood. The police officers that profiled us said later that they had been told during their morning roll call to be on the lookout for two male robbers. At the time, I was very tiny and certainly didn't look anything like a male robber. My mother had gone to the bank, and as she left, two police officers followed her out of the parking lot. They sped in front of her with sirens blaring, then jumped out with guns drawn. I jumped out screaming at them not to shoot. I didn't realize I could have been shot just for that. We were allowed to leave. Much later, my mother took the officers to court and won a settlement. But think about it, who really won that day? No one. Settlements for things like this are funded by taxpayers, just like police salaries are. And I was certainly no winner. I had nightmares for years, and it took me forever to learn how to drive because I was paranoid of the police. Many of my friends, especially my male friends, have similar experiences. My husband told me about when he first started driving and was pulled over his first time out with his brand new driver license. Imagine that. You finally get your freedom and your independence. Your parents allow you to take the car out with your friends. You pick everyone up, and then soon after that, you're pulled over and a gun is pointed in your face. You've done nothing wrong. It's all because of your skin color. Do you feel the trauma in that? Almost every Black man I know, especially those who are dark-skinned, have had similar experiences. As a result, mothers of Black children have different worries than other mothers. Parents of Black children have to educate them about all of this at a very early age. We have to tell our kids that the world will treat them differently because of their skin color. Does it seem fair to you that mothers of Black children, especially Black boys, have to have a separate fear other than other mothers? Just looking at these examples, does it really seem like all Americans are free? Freedom is not just about not having to walk around in chains. Freedom is also an ease of thinking. Freedom is a state of mind. The darker your skin color in this country, the less freedom of mind and peace you have. Imagine walking around with that kind of trauma. Similar things may have happened to your darker skinned classmates without you even knowing. How many opportunities do we have to talk about such things? Indeed, for many African Americans, our very lives have depended on white people not knowing how we truly feel. Think about the stories I've told you. If anyone, myself included, had gotten in a police officer's face and started yelling and cursing, well, it's pretty easy to see my life could just simply be taken away from me, isn't it? For most Black people, this is a very real fear and a danger that is always at the forefront of our minds. My early experiences with the police traumatized me in ways that I struggle with to this day. All of these experiences create deep emotional wounds. Have you ever heard of childhood wounds? When someone goes through something very tragic or traumatizing at a very young age, they'll need a lot of help dealing with all of that pain when they become an adult. If they don't heal, they can end up becoming very mean and hateful. They end up making bad decisions in life. Their toxic actions can end up hurting other people, anyone they encounter. Now, compare America to a child with these wounds who is trying to navigate through a dysfunctional family. What we have witnessed in our America over the past several months has been our country's attempt at healing its childhood wounds. This country was built on racism, hatred, and violence, dysfunction in its most destructive forms. For instance, did you know that the historical formation and foundation of the police was to catch slaves, to recover humans as property? Think about that. Those who are supposed to protect and serve all American citizens instead have a history built on hurting people of color. When you look at America through that lens, does it make a little more sense why some people are now calling to defund the police? This is what is meant by systemic racism. Systemic racism infects systems that are supposed to protect its citizens. You can see the ugly stains of racism in housing, the educational system, law enforcement, and the judicial system. The judicial system. There is a violence that is attached to the way that Black people are viewed and dealt with in this country. Now, of course, no one can stop a person from being racist, but there are supposed to be laws to protect my life, my livelihood, and my safety. This is especially true of the police. If you are a racist and you have a position of power to take someone's life in your racist actions, well, I think you can agree that's a problem. And that's only the tip of the iceberg. Did you know that Thomas Jefferson owned slaves and had biracial children from his slaves? Did you know that the New York Stock Exchange was built on top of African burial grounds on the bodies of slaves? And have you ever heard of Black Wall Street? Well, at a time when America segregated us by moving us away from whites, we thrived. We had amazing communities like the one in Tulsa, Oklahoma. It had it all. In the 1920s, Blacks in the Greenwood community lived in opulence, with communities with schools, hotels, movie theaters, and newspapers. There were many Black doctors and lawyers living and working in Greenwood. In 1921, the community was destroyed by a white racist mob who was jealous and angry at the success. More than 300 people were killed. 35 square blocks were destroyed. The mob dropped dynamite as they flew overhead in planes. Think about it. America didn't want us. We thrived where we were planted, and then we were killed. Looking at the end of the story, some assume that Black people who live in poor communities want to live that way. But can you now see how poor Black communities were created? Yes, racism is as old as America itself. In some ways, America is afraid of its own history. So why are people so angry about all of it? My theory is that none are properly taught history. This promotes misunderstandings. Most Americans don't know the true history of their own country. We all need to know the full richness of history. We need to give credence to the horrible things that have happened on American soil. Painting a beautiful but false picture of our country does no favors to anyone. In fact, it is doing a disservice to us all. Without the backdrop of history, people fuel arguments on raw emotion without knowing the underlying background. It's like coming to the end of a book, reading the last page, then judging the story without knowing the pages that came before. Understanding the pages that came before and reading the entire proverbial book can help you to feel the curse of intergenerational racism and its hatred and violence. Otherwise, people look at a situation and say, well, why is it okay to say Black power and Mexican pride and all kinds of other pride? But then as soon as someone says white power or white pride, then it's a problem. Well, there's a history there that's not being taught. I'm a teacher, so I know that you're not learning all of this in school. You're not learning history in a true reflection through a timeline that makes sense. Even the label with which to call us often has become convoluted. There has been a long history of choices, probably starting with the term Negro, derived from the Spanish word negro, meaning Black. Another very derogatory term has derived from this word. This word has caused a lot of confusion because it seems fine for Black people to use the derogatory term amongst themselves, but it causes a huge racial and ethical problem when others use it. This is because, like in so many other situations, Black folk have taken the pain and turned it into power. Now, in reference to myself, I prefer the term Black. I refer to my American brothers and sisters as Black folk. I think of Black folk around the world who are united with me by color and plight as Pan-Africans, which is an all-encompassing term. For people of other races who are referring to us, it is probably best to use the term African American. As you can see, there are different outlooks for different groups of people. There are many different types of people within any particular race. As we think of history, it is important to know that some problems started with the naming of some people as Black and others as white. America has used these terms to its advantage and decides when some people can have the title of white or not. For instance, America has not always considered Italians, Irish, and Jewish people to be white. Think about the ways that using these terms can affect someone's quality of life. Again, it is important not to assign any type of behavior to a certain race. Now, of course, there are some white people who are simply racist. They are married to their point of view, and it would be a miracle for anything or anyone to change that. These individuals deliberately gaslight others. What does gaslighting mean? It's when somebody creates so much confusion that it makes somebody else question their own experience. People do this by changing the subject, or they'll ask you for statistics or other irrelevant details, or they'll label things as political and try to limit your right to talk about it. This type of behavior is draining and a waste of time. I'm a teacher of people, but I do not allow anyone to waste my time. I will not be baited into an argument. Always know that issues of police murdering or abusing citizens is not politics. These are human rights issues. If you're a member of the Student United Nations, forensics, or speech and debate, these are topics our nation needs to be dealing with. Don't let this dialogue sputter out. Open your mouth and keep talking. Then there's some white people that feel angry with the way some other white people are acting, such as going into Black communities and destroying things, but making it seem like the Black residents destroyed their own communities. They feel hurt, embarrassed, and angry with the past actions of other racist whites throughout history. I have learned that such individuals sometimes start arguing or shut down because they feel helpless and blamed. Of course, there are also the thoughts and opinions of African Americans to consider. Part of developing the new America will need to come with the understanding that all Black people do not think the same way. For instance, some Black people say they're tired of explaining, then they just shut down and refuse to talk about any of the racial issues. This is because we have talked about it and explained it for years. Throughout history, Black people have boycotted and had sit-ins and been beaten, hosed, marched on Washington, protested both peacefully and violently, written to governors, senators, and presidents, lost their jobs, had their lives threatened, and lost their lives to tell America about the horrors of its racism. Isn't it exasperating just to listen to that? Surely you can understand that level of frustration. But almost on cue, the young people of America have stepped up to the plate. You all have done the protests. You have arranged events like this one to strengthen your thinking skills and sharpen your thought processes. Again, for that, I thank you. You have bravely stood up to the generations before you, and you have eloquently told them that racism has no part in your life. Throughout all of this, we start to see that we can't lump any group of people into one heap, especially using words like racist or thug or any other type of label. Take the time to learn about each situation and the people involved. Then judge for yourself if it's right or wrong. So let's go back to my motto and let's really think about it. Let's break it all down. Honest dialogue built on pure intention can incite change. So, first of all, let's be honest. We have to tell the truth about what we feel, what we think, feel, and believe. And what is a dialogue? Well, that's a conversation. It's a give and take verbal dance between two people. Each one gives the other one a chance to talk. Each one also reserves the power of simply saying, I don't know, instead of rather just trying to win an argument. Both start to see there really is no argument. This is where pure intention comes in. Well, what's that? Pure intention is what happens when we forget about race and politics and gender. We throw all the labels out the window. We deal with each other as human beings. When we see each other on a human level, we become concerned about one another's pain. At a very deep level, you start to see the pain of your fellow human as your own pain. We show care and concern for one another. We move forward in compassion. Well, what is that? Compassion is equal parts love, patience, and forgiveness. This will allow us to step forward in empathy. Empathy is putting yourself in the other person's situation. As the saying goes, you walk a mile in their shoes, and you really care enough to find out what they're really going through by actively listening to them. Trust the stories your friends tell you about racism. I have so much respect for many of you because you already do that. You have an integrity that most adults don't. If you have friends that never spoke out until the past few months, hopefully you're starting to understand why you never knew they felt that way. Okay, so now what does incite mean? The word incite actually has somewhat negative connotations. Usually people think of things like inciting a riot or inciting anger, but I chose that word strategically. I prefer to think of incite. I prefer to think of incite as sparking something, as being an active catalyst for something that would not have happened otherwise. Well, like what? Change. Our country needs to change. We need to give up the painful history of violence and racism and create a country that lives up to the promise that is America. Again, please do not let this dialogue end. Dialogue on so many topics is often closed in this country. We get uncomfortable because we never have these discussions. People stay hurt based on misunderstandings and a lack of information. They stay stuck in assumptions and they don't ask questions, which can be dangerous. If we don't learn from history and make some changes, you will see these same problems with your children and your grandchildren. This is why I'm so proud of you for making some moves to change these ways of thinking and to rebuild your America. I'm willing to do whatever I can to help you in this process. Consider it a process. But where can we start? It seems like such a huge task. It's hard to figure out where to even grab a chunk from all of this. Remember, start with compassion, then move to empathy. Think about the personal stories I've shared with you and let that inspire you to make things better. For instance, what does it mean to be an ally? Like I said before, it means trusting others' experiences about racism. That feeling of injustice is the start of allyship. Being an ally also means speaking up when you see a person of another race being mistreated. You guys are standing up for what is right, and I applaud you. There are many adults who don't have the courage that you young people have. Let's learn to embrace differences. Make a conscious decision to do this internally within your own individual heart and mind. Then think of the physical actions that can complement this change. Becoming an ally is a chance for us to unite, not only as Americans, but more importantly, as humans. We start to see racism as an American problem and and a human rights issue, not a political issue. So, what realities do we need to step forward into the future with? For instance, what happens when you do your best and something still goes wrong? Remember, not all Black people will see things the same way. You might implement everything you learned and come across a Black person that has no intentions of working with you. Be good anyway. Do good anyway. Do not let anyone deter you from being a good human. See it as part of your evolution as a human. Don't let anyone's ignorance deter you from your goal. Part of all of this is understanding that we each get a chance to make our own decisions and live life according to our own standards. Let others decide their thoughts and actions for themselves, while you get to make those decisions for you. Develop compassion for yourself and others, and never stop growing. So, what did you learn from all of this? What's something you learned that challenged the way you thought before you heard me speak? Did anything that I said today lead you to become more empathetic no matter what your race is? Reflect on what you learned. This is the start of changing your thought process. Branch out a little bit at a time. Try to make a friend of another race. Let empathy be your badge. Wear it like you wear your clothes. Remember, keep it simple. Start small. Decide on one small thing you can do today. Change starts with you. Well, one thing you could do is start by thanking yourself for listening to my entire speech. You paid attention to this whole thing. Yay, you! Awesome. I want to thank you for taking time to listen to me today. I hope my words have touched your heart and inspired you to move forward in positive action. Follow me across social media by searching my name, Michelee Smith Tynes. You can find me on Facebook, Pinterest, YouTube, and Twitter, but my current favorite seems to be Instagram. That's where I do my live shows. I also have a kid-friendly account with the Instagram handle @TeacherTynes. Again, thank you so much for listening.